Hello, this is your host Val with the VK Career Conversation. The reason I decided to do this is that we all come from a place of insecurity when we're trying to figure out or just not knowing where we want to go with our career. What do I want to do? What's my next move with my career? Why am I feeling stuck here with what I'm doing? I remember when I started off in my career, I had no idea what I was doing, what I wanted to do. I want everyone to feel comfortable coming on. We will have professionals talking to you, myself, and others. We'll be consistent. We will feed your soul. We want you to ask questions. But I just think it's a platform that will allow you to really feel comfortable gaining information so that you can move forward in your career. You're listening to VK Career Conversations with Val. Tune in on the first and third Monday of the month.
All right, so that video that you guys just watched is, of course, we have our VK Career Conversations on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Kind of just depends on everyone's schedule, but you can always catch us if you aren't able, if you kind of want something a little more consistent. We do air on the LV with Val radio station on the first and third Monday of every month. So you can always tune in there. It's the full and complete episode. So if you guys miss it live and you are like want to listen to it on the go, we have it on our station. You can just download the LV with Val app or go on lvwithval.com. All right. Well, of course, today I'm not Miss Carter. You guys are used to seeing Valerie sitting in this seat. I am not her. I'm not the queen, but I'm here to kind of fill in her place for this conversation, of course, with the lovely host, Dr. Pinkston and Day. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good morning, Abigail. It's good to have you on, and we'll miss Val, of course, but this should be a lot of fun. And I am Dr. Marianne Pinkston. I'm a family practice doctor in San Antonio, Texas, but I practice integrative medicine, which is a different style, more, natural style of medicine, holistic style, wellness, things like that. And I also have a podcast, which you guys are so gracious to let me market a little bit here. People can find me at drpbetterlife.com. But I've been on with you guys almost a year now, I think, and this has been going very well. I hear you hit 10K subscribers, and congrats on that.
We're
probably
thank you so much.
I outed you, but that is very exciting. Happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
Yay, we're happy to have you here.
And hi, everybody. I'm Day Smith. I'm the Chief Efficiency Officer and owner of Simplicity by Day, productivity coach and digital organizer for small business owners. I'm also a modern mompreneur. I have full-time career, full-time parenting, of course, and a full-time business. I'm also a speaker, podcast host of the Modern Mompreneur podcast, and author. And I am a huge fan of all things that VK and Val does. So I'm here to contribute to the conversation, and so proud of Abby for holding it down. Go girl.
Right.
Yes. And if you guys don't know, you may recognize my voice, but not necessarily my face. I am the executive media coordinator for all of Miss Carter's businesses. She has a lot going on, and I kind of help her out with the media side of things. I'm usually behind the scenes. I'm sitting in a chair over there, kind of answering comments and stuff. So this is definitely a change of pace for me, but I'm super duper excited for this conversation today. So whatever we were coming up with today's conversation, I, of course, turned to the lovely co-hosts, Dr. Marianne Pinkston and Day as well. And we kind of, I liked what the direction we want to go. Of course, Career Conversations is about, your career and your job and professionalism and all things that kind of tie into that. So today's conversation is going to be talking about keeping your composure when you're dealing with maybe difficult coworkers or a difficult leader. And kind of how you can remain professional in those moments like that. So I'll start with you, Dr. Pinkston, because I think this was one that you kind of came up with, and I feel like you had something on your heart for this. So go ahead and tell us how you kind of want to lead with this conversation.
It's something that I'm in a little bit different chair with, being the boss then I don't really have to deal with things like that too often, but I have in the past, very much so. So whether it's been through school and through jobs I've worked there, medical school, residency, I've had to work with a lot of different people on different levels and in different scenarios, and people have to work with me, and so I'm learning from other people about how to deal with difficult situations. And then, of course, I have patients. I do a lot of counseling and discussions with patients about their difficult situations and work life and stressors that they go through. So I love having different hats in that area. Keeping your composure is something that we do at all levels. So regardless if you are the boss or you are the employee or the student or wherever it is that you are, we all have to keep our composure at some point. And I think the more that we are, that we develop over our lives and become leaders, the better we get at that. I hope. I know not everybody does. So if you're somebody dealing with a difficult leader, they didn't develop out. They didn't learn their manners at some point. And so you're going to have to fill in and be mature when they are not sometimes. And I think what I just advise most of the time is to kind of remove yourself from your emotions. We tend to react very strongly whenever something comes our way. I'm horrible at that. In situations where I have an emotional trigger of some sort, then I'll respond really strongly. And, when you're in a business situation, you cannot do that. Let me just say professional situation, you cannot do that. You shouldn't do it in your relationship either, but just kind of remove yourself, step back and take a thought. And then, place your brain in a different mode. You have to be in professional mode, practical mode, and take the emotion out. So I guess that's kind of my jump start to why I thought this would be important and helpful.
Yeah, I really like that you said that kind of when you become a leader, you deal with that less and less because you're kind of the person that people turn to, right? But I do think sometimes as a leader, you might even deal with it in ways where the people that you're supposed to be leading and guiding are being difficult, maybe in some ways. And a lot of and pretty much every job I've had, obviously I'm kind of starting my career. I haven't been in the professional field quite as long, but thankfully in the jobs that I have had, I've worked my way up to a leadership role. And, you kind of have to deal with difficult people every step of the way, whether it's people that are your colleagues that are on the same level or people that are above you kind of telling you, like they're supposed to be helping you get there, but sometimes you feel like they might be like beating you down almost. And I have a few anecdotes that I want to give, but I want to let Day speak on the topic before we get started, like delving into everything.
Yeah. So, when I saw this topic, I thought about how it just really speaks to growth and maturity, because a lot of times I was, as a young adult, sometimes you're thinking that you need to be true to yourself and speak your mind, which is true. But as you get older, you realize that silence is golden sometimes, or just saying less says more. And so you don't have to say everything that comes to your mind. You don't have to be so reactive, because what's going to happen a lot of times, you're going to probably regret what you're saying off the fly. And you're going to have to eat your words or go apologize, or, you may have burned bridges that you needed to still be intact. So the consequences of you not keeping your composure, having an emotional reaction, are far greater than you trying to work on yourself and learn maturity and learn how to be more tactful in the way you approach things. I mean, I was teaching my son this the other day in the car, because he's 8, and I'm trying to teach him about having a filter and not saying everything that comes to your mind. And he said to me, well, you're not teaching Nova, my daughter who's 5. And I'm like, well, she's not quite there to learn that lesson. And so it's like I'm teaching him at this early stage about maturity and thinking through things and keeping his composure. Don't let everything get to you. So hopefully he will be the type of adult who later in life will be able to keep his composure and not react so much. So
that's great that you're doing that, because I'm having to teach my 22-year-old how to do that now. I wish I'd started at 5 or 8.
Well, I'm trying to not make the same mistakes I do.
I think as women too, we kind of have that pressure even more on us to set aside our emotions in situations like that. How many times has like a man whether thankfully I've also had a lot of female bosses, so I don't have to deal with the male leadership quite as much. And I don't say thankfully to like knock on men or anything, but I do like that I can relate to my leaders as like we have something in common in that way. But like how many times like has like in a meeting or something, like a man gone off and like yelled at his colleagues or yelled at his coworkers and reacted with emotion, and people almost see that as like a respectful thing. But when a woman does the same thing, it's kind of looked at as like, okay, well, you need to turn that off. Like, you're emotional, you're hormonal, you need to relax. Sure. And I think that pressure is even more on us as women. And I think also as like, and I like how both of you kind of addressed that is something you develop over time, is learning to turn off your emotions, whether it feels natural or whether we think it's right or not. That's just kind of the world we live in, especially in a professional sense. You have to be able to step outside of the situation. And the second you're like too emotionally involved to the point where you're reacting or acting out of character, you're in the wrong automatically. Absolutely. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter how that person may have like pushed your buttons to get you there. If you... What'd you say?
Try. Sometimes they do. They try. They push buttons to push you there on purpose.
To get you to that point. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's such a double standard with women and men and keeping your composure, because the minute you have an emotional reaction, you're labeled as, you you PMSing, you have this or that. And men, I often tell my husband and my son, going back to my family, I'm like, you have an emotional reaction too. Anger is an emotion. Frustration is an emotion. It's not just the crying and the drama, so to speak, that's associated with women. We all have emotional reactions. It's just the perception of the way it comes out with women versus men. It's just a double standard. So I'm always trying to like relearn this in my household. And I think that's our responsibility in our relationships. And even if you're managing men, Dr. Pinkston, you can talk to them about that, or if you get in relationships, I think it's up to us to be able to have these conversations and show them the difference, because otherwise they just kind of accept what is said and not know that there's a difference. So
that's so true. And there is an innate difference between men and women on that level. I know there's mixtures in between, and every personality is different. I get that. I've always admired men for that, for that practicality. And I've actually tried to learn. I've tried to focus a little bit on that and try to pattern myself. Not that I think there's anything wrong with being an emotional being. Being female is a beautiful thing, and we all have, our positive sides of our nature and of our gender, and those things are good. But in a professional sense, it's where it flips and it changes. And again, you do develop it over time. It's a maturity. And I don't, Abigail, for instance, very young, and you too, Dave, you're both young, but you both are very unusually mature, and that goes to your, your all your pluses, and you're learning that young, and I admire that very, very much. We all, even at 54, I still have a lot to learn, about keeping my emotional composure and things like that. Sometimes I think it may come from, you look at nurture versus nature. We've talked a lot about nature right now. Some of it is in the nurture side. So there are patterns about your behavior that you learn from when you were younger, maybe past experiences, past traumas, if you want to look at it that way. Watching your parents, you could have had a great childhood, you could have a terrible childhood. There's a lot of things that teach you along the way how to gear yourself in professional and, non-professional relationships that go into that too. It's a little double-sided.
Yeah, there was definitely like a point in time, and that level of maturity definitely wasn't always there. I think some people think like, oh, you're this mature person, you've always been this way. And there was definitely a point in time where I was known to go off on somebody at work. And it was obviously more like casual work environments when I worked in like restaurants and retail and stuff like that. But I was known to go off. I was known to speak my mind. And there were points in time where I felt, this was justified because XYZ. And maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But in the end of the day, all it did was affect my reputation and the way people looked at me. And so I had to really take a step back and be like, okay, yeah, this person maybe isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Or maybe they're, because I had an instance where a person in management was just being really nasty to me constantly. And and I kind of went off on her, and I didn't get any sort of punishment because the upper manager kind of knew that that was an issue. And so at the time I was like, well, see, I was right. She shouldn't have done that. She shouldn't have said this and that. And then I realized, like, okay, but I'm the one that started yelling at her in the middle of a rush time. You know what I'm saying? Whether I felt right or wrong, it was like, okay, girl, you look a little crazy now. Accountability
is a really
and
nice
so,
thing. It's kind of
and so like now in my role what I do now is, I'm kind of a leader here in the office. I guide people. I tell them, I tell our team kind of the vision, and we all work together to execute it. I lead meetings. I kind of hold other people accountable, and I don't have if I were to go off on somebody just because they like annoyed me or something like that, like not only would that make me look bad, but that would affect me as a leader in the sense that like I could lose my job.
No, you
And
get a whole team too. It gets very
yes,
sensitive around everybody and how everybody else treats each other, and that's part of being a leader. And so, guys are young and up and coming. That's a learned, that is a learned trait. Some of us are more mature, younger, and develop, faster and better through that. Some people not, but that is something that you grow into watching and monitoring, other great leaders, emulating other great leaders and people that you've watched do that, just paying attention. So as you are coming up for those who are out there coming up in their career and, trying to learn how to do, the word I use often is diplomatic. So if you are in situations where you feel you're being, treated adversely, at the basis of most people's foul treatment of you is usually sort of jealousy or some sort of greed in a situation, or their own anger, their own personal anger. You can't always take it personally. Sometimes they're going through something. They just give it off on everybody else. But, you just have to remain very diplomatic. And so you can feel what you're feeling. You can say what you need to say. You can handle yourself in a situation, create boundaries. That's always good. We've talked about that 1,000 times, but you must always be diplomatic and say it and finesse it. Don't respond in that emotional sense and get triggered. So I think that's the part of the maturity that you learn watching other people too.
Yeah. One of the things I learned in my career early on was the term emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
In sales, they had a specialist come in and talk about Daniel Goleman's, I think it's Daniel Goleman, who is the author of emotional intelligence. And, you have IQ, which is what the intelligent quotient that you're born with. But they also talk about emotional intelligence, which is your EQ. And that's how you react emotionally. And what it does is it allows you to like take back your power, right? Whenever you lose your composure, you've actually given somebody else the ability to control your emotions. You've given them your power. They've made you mad. They've made you go off on them, as Abigail did. They've made you cry. Whenever you have emotional intelligence, you are able to control your emotions, not be a robot, but just think sensibly, because you can still have those conversations. Like Abby said, she was in her right to confront this person for mistreating her. But the way you go about it, diplomatically, the way you go about it should maybe look differently, because it's going to be more received. You're going to still be able to be a person of leadership in your position. And perceived as a person of leadership and not someone who's erratic. Right. And so if you could do anything in your career, I would research, find ways that you can develop your emotional intelligence. And that's the tool that you would use to manage your composure. And it'll last you through personal and professional situations. I guarantee it.
Absolutely. Well said. That's great. I'm going to look that up. I wrote that down. She always gives us something to write. I got to go study.
And I think, it's inevitable. You're going to deal with different personalities. Like, not everyone is going to be your friend. And I think that's for a long time where I went wrong too. I was looking for like personal relationships and friendships in my jobs and in my career. And I was like, that's not always, you can. I think it's possible. And I think there is a way to go about it in a healthy way. Obviously, you work we work 40 hours out of the week. We sleep another however many hours. You know what I mean? So how realistically, how are you going to meet other people? So I think it is possible to make friends at work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. And I think I was putting a lot of pressure on that, like, oh, well, I have these like personal relationships with all these people. But as I started to kind of move up in leadership and kind of responsibility too, I realized that I really had to set that aside, those like personal relationships. And, sometimes, you might have somebody that you're trying to guide and they don't. And I think we talked about this. I forget what episode it was when we were talking about like working with family and stuff like that and working with friends. And you kind of have to set aside your relationship, like kind of like setting aside your emotions so that you can be diplomatic and so that you can be objective and so that you can approach, different situations in the right way. I did want to ask you guys, because I know we're talking about keeping your composure in terms of like dealing with different personalities, but how can you keep your composure when you really feel like you're working with somebody who isn't doing their job and it's affecting you?
That's a tough one. Probably a big one for our audience out there.
Oh, of course.
That's the thing I hear the most. I was just talking to my daughter the other day who has a job. She works with family, and then she works with a bunch of people around her age. And she's on 18, 19 now. I don't even remember. And she is constantly frustrated at the fact that either she gets blamed for something somebody else has done, or, she's trying to convey fairness that, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And you may be favoring them, babying them almost a little bit. And, I'm really working hard trying to do my job. And I told her, I said, first of all, it is difficult to own a business. It's difficult to manage several people, so many different personalities, so many different ages, genders. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of differences that go on with people. So what you need to do is, first of all, try to figure out where they're coming from, maybe get into their head, get into their mentality, see if that, and play devil's advocate, see if that helps you to understand what they're thinking. And then when you understand what they're thinking, where their mentality is coming from, you could probably guide people a little bit, even be a little suggestive because you're smart. And, you could probably suggest maybe we could do it this way, or even to your bosses, or family, and that makes it difficult. But, you can suggest some things. And that way you're putting it in their mind that you're thinking about your responsibilities, thinking about other people, and that you may have some leadership qualities. You may show yourself to be a little bit of a leader there. Maybe they'll promote you, put you in a different place. So there's advantages to that. There's advantages to seeing people in a different light and handling, trying to understand where different people are coming from instead of just thinking, well, woe is me. They're treating me different. I'm in a bad situation. Somebody's not doing their job. There's a way to approach it and think about it to try to modify it over time and teach yourself something from it. Even if it isn't always fair, because it's never going to be. There's no fairness in it ever.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Day, did you want to touch on that too?
Yeah, I was thinking about if you're in a work situation, you feel that way. I would ask two questions, whether or not you can answer it or your superiors can answer it. But has the standard been set for that person to know
what to do,
what to do, what good looks like, what acceptable looks like? Has the standard been set? You may come in with a high standard on how something should be done, and that's the way you perform. Their expectations on how something should be done could be lower. So you may want to ask yourself, has the standard been communicated? And if not, maybe you or your superior can communicate that. You can go to them and ask that. And the second thing I would ask is, are they being held accountable for meeting that standard? Because I think the best way people learn, whether they're teenagers, kids, grown-ups, is being able to be held accountable and understanding the consequences. That's one thing I don't feel like the younger generations, including myself, millennial, don't always have the opportunity to learn. Because we're always getting saved. We're always getting a participation trophy. We're always getting patted on the back for doing the minimum, which is good intentions from the folks who are raising us. But I feel like, is that person being held accountable for either not meeting the standard or whatever they're doing? Because that is the only way I think they will be able to change, or one of the ways they can change, to be able to put in more, to do more. So what's the standard, and are they being held accountable would be a way for you to communicate to your superiors to see if that will shift anything in the dynamic. So
let me ask, because you brought that up, Abigail, about the accountability. So if they are, if you're in that situation, you feel like somebody is not doing their job, usually it's because they're not being held accountable. And
Right.
so approaching that is very, very difficult because you can't be the one to call them out. And you also have a difficult time going to your superiors to bring that up, because then you look like a tattletale. You look like
Right.
mm-hmm.
So what's the best way? I think that is the conundrum that most people fall into, is what is the best way to approach that situation without putting yourself out there, as the difficult.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and I think there are different ways to go about it, and not all sound comfortable. Initially, I kind of want to say, lead by example. Like, do what you think, what you would want to see out of your colleague or out of your leader. But sometimes sometimes that can hit you in the face. Sometimes you can be leading by example, and then you start to get taken advantage of. It's like, well, I don't have to do this because, so-and-so is going to take care of it. So-and-so is going to pick up after my slack. And I was in a situation at the job I had before I started working for Miss Carter, actually. I was working in management, and then I had my general manager over me. This is in retail. I had my general manager over me who was just not stepping up. She, in retail, obviously you have to work weekends, and I was in operations, so a lot of my projects were taking place on the weekends, and she would never, ever, ever work the weekends. And so I would have to do the kind of customer servicey stuff. But what I should have been doing was my operational projects from behind the scenes stuff. And I did not have the support that I needed to complete these projects. So week after week, I was falling further and further behind. And I remember coming to her and saying, I don't know what I need, but I need something, because I'm falling further and further behind, and I wanted to help, improve our store and make it better. And it felt impossible. And it felt like every solution that I suggested was kind of shot down. I'd be like, can you work on the weekends so that you can cover the customer service so that I can get ahead on these projects? And it was not being executed in the way that I felt like I needed. And we would talk to district managers and stuff like that. And like you said, Dr. Pinkston, I don't want to feel like a tattletale and be like, and then what if they come back to my general manager and say, oh, well, Abby said that you did this, this, and that, and now I have a target on my back. And now I could be, retaliated against, which is, of course, against company policy. That doesn't mean people don't do it, and does that put me in a worse position? And so I think, yes, you can lead by example and try to show, these difficult people that oh, this is what I want from you. But that if that backfires, sometimes it is as simple as just finding somewhere new. If you feel like the problem isn't being addressed, I do think a lot of people feel obligated to see things through, and I think there's a healthy balance there where you can see things through, but then you also need to know when it's your time to move on and go somewhere new.
It's not always easy to just pick up and move on. And some people have to endure, what they're doing. This is where I face things in clinic with patients. Many times they're in because they're not feeling well. Their health is failing. They're completely stressed out. Behind that, most of the time, is either a huge family situation or there's a work situation. And not everybody can pick up and move on. But that sometimes I tell them it's either your health and your sanity, or it's your situation sometimes needs to change, even though you feel you can't. Maybe you're stuck where you are. Maybe you're really not. This may be a great sign that it is time to look and move on. I know it's a very scary thing, but look at the consequence of that is your health at this moment, and everybody else in the family is paying for it too. So it is a very difficult boundary. You mentioned something earlier I thought was really important about approval. Wanting to be with everybody and needing approval. That was always something that I suffered from and still do to some extent. I've learned how not to do that so much. Why wow, what a relief, because that is something that happens, I think, when we're trying to be accepted in our workplace, is to be friends with everybody, to be the good guy all the time, and sometimes you just can't do that. But again, you go back to diplomatic front about it. You can push the envelope and set your boundaries without looking like an a-hole. It's possible, but again, a very fine, delicate balance. And you're right, sometimes you do just have to look elsewhere, do something a little different, move on. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think kind of what we were touching on earlier with dealing with different personalities too. If you're trying to hold someone accountable and they can't take that constructive criticism and then they react out of, like, let's say you're being completely diplomatic, you're being very objective, you're speaking in a way that is very professional, but you're trying to, convey to somebody like, hey, I need to see more of this from you, or maybe your behavior is not appropriate, and that person then comes back at you and they're reacting out of emotion and they're being like reactive. That's the best way to put it. How would you suggest going about a situation like that?
Your triggers and other people's triggers, and when they meet, can be a disaster sometimes. Again, I think it's the reactionary mode. So you are always responsible for yourself. You cannot be responsible for other people. Being responsible and accountable for yourself in those moments is the utmost importance. You do have to see what you're doing. Sometimes when you feel like somebody else is completely wrong and doing something wrong, it might be a time to look back in the mirror a little bit. Make sure you are not contributing to that somehow, because you might think you're all in the right. You might be able to completely justify everything you're thinking and doing. But when that's why I told my daughter, take the devil's advocate side, not only for other people and look at what's going on in their world and their life that might be causing them to behave that way, but look at you, what you might be doing to trigger that. And you may not know you're doing it.
Yeah.
That is a very difficult thing to do. But I think probably one of the most important things is to look at yourself, look in the mirror, make sure you touch base with you, make sure you're not pulling something like that out of them.
Yeah. What do you have to say about that, Dave?
I'm going to go back to the emotional intelligence. I'm going to, Dr. Pinkston, you can fact check me on this, but whenever you have that emotional trigger, what's happening is your amygdala is taking over your brain, right? It's like these emotions that cause you to fight or flight, where you don't think logically. You only think from a very primitive, basic level. And so if you're heated and they're heated, whatever the best outcome is not going to happen in that situation, because no one is going to think logically. Y'all just going to be going at it. I like to know first and foremost that that's going on. Like, I'm aware that happens. And so, not to say that I'm great in those situations, but I at least have the knowledge to know, okay, I'm having an emotional reaction, later on, that's what happened. But the way I've coped with it, and this could be good or bad, is I say to myself, I'm not doing this right now.
Right.
And I just say, I'm walking away. I'm not doing this right now, because I already know that I'm mad and I may say something that I may regret. And then you are not going to hear me logically, because you're upset too. We're both having these emotional reactions. So I have been very intentional on saying, you know what, I'm not doing this right now. And I just walk off. And if I care about the situation, whether it's my job or relationship or someone I care about, then I will revisit and say, okay, let's talk about this. If I don't care about you, if it's no love lost, I don't worry about it. I'm like, you know what? I had an incident with the baker at a grocery store because they messed up my daughter's birthday cake. So I was mad. And that was a situation where I was just like, you know what? I'm not doing this today. And I didn't revisit it. I was like, whatever, lost money. I'm not doing this. I can't get my point across to her. She can't get her point across to me. It's just a lost, whatever, how many dollars for this. I let that go. If it's someone else, like my spouse or my kids or someone I care about, I'm going to revisit. I'm going to say, let's figure this out. So I think sometimes you just, like Abigail said, you have to just let it go, leave. And then sometimes you need to address it. But I don't think that the best outcome will happen when everyone's emotional.
That's true. And you may have a plan ahead moment here. I was listening to you say that's so true. Thinking about situations that I've been in where maybe it would have been nice to know, I know I react that way. So what if I plan ahead? I have like a safe word or something where I'm like, somebody well. It could be somebody well at work. It could be somebody you're involved in relationship wise, and you just like say time out, or something that's like you're escalating to that moment where you are not normal any longer, and things are going to come out of that mouth, and it would be time to just say, look, time out. We're not going anywhere with this. Breathe and let's walk away for a little while.
Yeah.
It just plan ahead a little bit if you
that's a good point.
Way.
I really like that you guys both brought that up, because it seems simple, right? Like you're being emotional, just stop and back away. And sometimes, when you think about it, you're like, yeah, I think I could do that. And then you're in a moment and you're angry, you're worked up, the other person's angry, they're worked up. And I personally struggle with, I don't like being misunderstood. Yeah. So especially if I feel like my point isn't coming across, I will sit there and fight it and fight it and fight it and push and push and push so that person can understand me. And something that I'm learning, I'm still working on this, is don't poke the bear, right. Because if someone's like you said, Day, no one's listening. When you're in that state of mind, you're not listening to what the person is saying. All you care about is what you're going to say. And so it's literally like you guys are talking at each other and not to each other. And so I do think that is such a useful skill that I definitely think a lot of young people struggle with, and something I actively, like, in the moment have to say, okay, Abby, shut up, be quiet. Like, you're not gonna get your point across, and you're just wasting your breath at that point. And again, affecting the way that person now views you. And I don't think
energy, there's a lot of
yeah.
And there's a lot of energy that goes into it after you walk away too. So to be able, boy, that is a great skill. If you can ever really learn, I'm still trying to learn that at 54. Oh my goodness, ask some people I know very well, and they will tell you are not good at that, Marianne. But I will stew and stew over it and just react even for hours after if it's something that really hits home to me. And like you, I get very, very upset if my integrity is questioned or if I'm not appreciated in some way, because really my intentions are so good and my effort is always there. And so those really hit home. If those triggers get pulled, then it's impossible to respond appropriately for quite some time. It's just something I think everybody needs to work on that. And again, goes back to what we were saying earlier about being reactionary,
Right.
Try not
to react. I like that you said that you use a lot of that mental energy after, because how many times have you been taking a shower and you're reliving that conversation and you're playing it back and you're like, I should have said this and I should have said this. Maybe I should have worded it this way. And you kind of have to trust yourself in the moment, that what you said is what you said. And you can't change it, and there's no point. And this is, of course, easier said than done. But there's no point in sitting there overthinking something that already happened. Like Day said too, you can always go back and revisit it once you both calm down. You can go back and say, hey, and take accountability as yourself to be like, I don't like the way I reacted. I don't like the person that you saw, and I want to make this right if it matters. But you can also cut people off. Bye.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That is another maturity factor and another learned skill. I was talking about that with my trainer this morning about, after I view life as there's so many things that you go through and trying to, gain all that approval and be everybody's friend and do the right thing all the time. And, so much of that energy when things just go horrible and go wrong and life turns completely upside down. Sometimes you go the complete opposite way where you shut everybody off, you're angry and just everything is bad and everything. And then at some point you arrive to the middle. And what you do is you just learn that balance of who is really important, what's really important, keep your circle small, and hang on to the things that are truly worthwhile and let go of the things that are not. It's
absolutely
not. Time and your energy are so valuable. It's like a bank account.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you are trying to fill that bank account and create that savings. When people are taking out of it, taking withdrawals out of it all the time, and you're left, empty. Then, you really will punish, yourself and your world and your mind and energy and all. You've got to learn how to protect that. That's protect your peace. I love that. That's always been a thing.
Yeah, and I think people are more, and this kind of goes more into a personal way, personal sense of it, but I think there are, when you were talking about a filter earlier, Day, I think we all have a filter, of course, professionally, but do you ever notice yourself, like maybe the people closest to you, you almost use as a punching bag sometimes?
Yeah.
I find myself doing that because that they're still going to love you. So you take all that, like all those times that you kept your mouth shut at work, and then you bring it home, or maybe in road rage on the highway, and you take it out in these other ways. Do you guys have any like healthier ways to kind of get that out without hurting the people closest to you?
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. I was thinking of that when we were getting on this call. It's like I am very composed, I would say, professionally. I don't know if I don't let them get in to control me, my emotions, because I'm very intentional with that. I'm really good at staying composed. I let stuff roll off. I'm like, okay. But when it comes to the person who is the closest to me, which is my mom, my husband, my sisters, now it's not that I react and go off on them, but I let them have so much more of an emotional power over me. I will cry more, curse more, angry more, all the things much easier with them. And the way that I have just recently, y'all, like yesterday, like just recently, I have been working on one. Don't let them control. They're not responsible for my joy. They're not responsible for the temperament, and leveling out of my emotions. So I make that declaration to myself, like I control that. And I also, when I'm emotional, because after I have like a little argument or something, I'm by myself for a little bit because I probably walked away, and I will say to myself, like, is this necessary, or do I need to be this upset, or like just trying to calm myself down? Because what I don't want to do is waste time, like Dr. Pinkston said, on something that's insufficient, that's not important. We could be living this other life, this other reality where we're both in a state of joy and happy, and instead of me carrying this thing that's not even important. So I try to make that decision quick and fast to say, is this something to have another conversation with, or is this something to let go of? And I just let it go. Or I go back.
I think it's a sign of very deep love and trust to be able to be yourself around somebody that, if you are able to show, your true nature, but it oftentimes it's showing your true pain. So if you're around somebody that sees that side of you, most of the time it is because you have a very deep love and trust that you're able to show them your pain and show them that does not make it right. And so to be able to be accountable to that and come back and say, you're sorry. Can you help me, get through these moments? Again, this is why we know we're getting to that point. I've known you a long time now. You know how I'm going to respond. I know how you're going to respond. Can we come up with some way where we just say, because you will never get those minutes back. Those minutes you hurt somebody, or that you were hurt, or that you continue to hurt long after you've walked away, you will never get those minutes back in your life.
True.
And they're going to love you anyway, most of the time. Sometimes they don't, but that's usually a sign that they're not worth being in your circle. And that's a hard thing to face sometimes. And I don't know, Abigail, do we have followers today? Do we have questions? Well, I know you are usually back there controlling all that. You don't have that fingertips today. How are we doing on our people?
We don't have a ton of people tuning in right now. We don't really have any questions. So we probably can wrap this up here a little bit early, just since we don't have
I didn't mean to slam the brakes on anything.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. I did want to add too, kind of to what we were talking about in terms of like the people closest to you and how you kind of cope with like maybe some of the stuff you may be holding in. And again, I'm young, I'm 25, I'm still learning all this like emotional intelligence and stuff. And I feel like definitely over the past year, I've grown a lot. Something that I do is I kind of like, I live with my mom right now, and I kind of preface, I'm like, I've had a long day, Mom.
Yeah.
I want to veg out in my room. I don't want you to ask me questions. And I try to say it in a most respectful way, but I'm like, I don't want to go off on my mom. I love my mom. So I have to like tell her, like, I've had a long day. I am tired. And I know you want to chit chat. I'm not in a chit chatty mood. Like, I'm not going to be a person that you want to chit chat with right now. So I've found that kind of leading with and just being really honest with yourself and honest with that person. Like, I'm not myself today. Everything is irritating me. The sound of you chewing is irritating me. Like, the sound of your feet walking on the ground is irritating me. And I need to separate myself from the situation before I react in a way where I'm not keeping my composure. Which is today's episode.
You are so right. I will tell you, yesterday, I don't know if this is the first time that this ever came to my brain. And at 54, you think it would have come sooner than this. But my daughter, who I told you works and is working with family, going through all this, when she left for work, she was happy, doing well. And then, 8 hours later, she comes in the door, she looks awful. And, I had a lot to say. I wanted to there were things to catch up on that we talked about earlier or whatnot. And I could sense it. Wow. And I could see it on her face. She was exhausted. And I was like, Marianne, when you come home, look at the past, 20 years with you and your kids where you've come home and they've all like happy to see mom and come flooding where you were just like, and I think about that. That's because I was a little hurt because she responded so kind of curt to me. And I was like, remember all those times where you came home feeling like that, and you needed to just kind of diffuse and let down. I think if you do recognize that you need to do that you need that alone time for just a little bit, go change your clothes, get something to, get a little hot cocoa or whatever it is, whatever you drink, get settled down and kind of veg a little bit and then just recognize, okay, I'm ready to get back at my relationships and everybody else now. Kids need to know from their parents that is something that can occur. You need to do that in the office too. So if you're having a rough time or whatnot, I do that with my staff sometimes. I'm like, okay, it's one of those days, guys. And they're like, okay, that's it. We'll avoid. No problem. Come for what. But just communicating, communication is always key with everything.
I love that. And I would say the way you do that with your mom, I'm hoping she's able to do that with you. Right. And the way you and Dr. Pinkston, your employer. And also even with younger kids, I just learned something from you, Abigail. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to do that with my kids, like teaching them it's okay for me to have time alone. And it's okay for you to have time alone. And we don't have, and learning boundaries and,
Day, look at my head nodding.
Yes, because I don't think that's something that I know for me as a mom, like, can I do that? Can I say I need some time?
Yes, you can.
That is totally can.
That is so healthy. And I never did that with my children and I would have. And so that is absolutely important. I think we this is another, kind of gender slant for everything, that women are very bad about that, about communicating that we have needs to, and we have
overextending ourselves.
Oh my goodness. And so, I call it the superwoman syndrome. And so you really need to learn how to do that. And if you can do that, if you both can do that at your age, you're going to save yourself 30 years of pain. Let me tell you, it's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, this has been a really, really good conversation. Thank you guys for letting me fill in. I know Miss Carter's a little more seasoned in this way, but I hope that I did the show justice and I did her justice. Thank you guys for kind of helping me keep everything together and stuff like that. This has been a really, really fun conversation. I really enjoyed this.
Great. You really did.
Awesome.
You
did great. It was fun.
Thank you. So we can go ahead and go around and give our final thoughts on the conversation and give your shout outs and all those kinds of things. And then we will wrap up.
Sounds good. Day, you go.
All right. All right. So this is a great topic. Thank y'all for allowing us to share more about it. And I think what's learned here will be able to carry you through professionally, personally, your life, because it's all about relationships, right? And how you approach things, even with yourself, and how you kind of keep the peace within yourself. So finding ways to keep your composure or finding ways to deal with difficult situations that pull you out, that's going to help you, is going to be beneficial for you long term. So this is definitely one that you want to replay if you have the time. And then for me, I have my website down here, simplicitybyday.com. If you have any needs around productivity or digital organizing or just creating structure and order so that you can keep your composure in life, feel free to reach out. Happy to connect with you guys and just share more about how to be more organized.
Absolutely. And Day, you're wonderful at that. Well said. I don't have much to add, honestly. Again, I agree. Relationships are very difficult things, whether it's something personal. I'm one of those people, everything's personal to me, even in the work environment, even around my employees, even around, others in traffic or whatnot. I take every relationship as an important place. Even if I don't know you and you're standing in front of me at the grocery store, you're important. I think it's always good to look at where others are and what they're going through, realize you are not the only person that is suffering and having a tough time. And that communication is always key. I love Day bringing up emotional intelligence. It's always been one of my favorite topics of words. I don't know much about it. I'm learning, still learning. At 54, still learning. But I do love the fact that we touched on this today. I think it's incredibly important, especially around the holidays and going into a new year. I think if we can all commit to better ourselves and think more about others and where we're going, what we're doing with others, I think we'll make it a better year after COVID and all, and the political atmosphere and everything. We've all been tough on each other for the last few years. I think it's time to soften down a little bit, work better together. So this has been a great show. You can find a lot of information on me at drpbetterlife.com, anywhere from social media to my podcasts and clinic information and things like that. And Abigail, you did a great job today, honey. Val would be very proud. So
Thank you.
Great
And
job, baby.
I'll make sure to send her the link.
Thanks to our listeners and everybody that's out there.
Yes.
We appreciate you very, very much. This is fun.
Thank you so much to our listeners. Yes. And I think they summed it up really well. I don't really have too much to add to the conversation other than, like Day and Dr. Pinkston said, just practice emotional intelligence. It's easier said than done, but sometimes it's worth stepping away from a situation rather than reacting with like your gut instinct. You can find us at vkccu.net. You can also find, if you are interested in starting up your own medical practice, Ms. Carter has a business called VK Consultant Group. You can visit that at vkconsultantgroup.com. We also have a nonprofit, lverinc.com. We're running a toy drive right now. We are taking donations until the 12th of December. You can find more information on that on lverinc.com. And of course, our radio show on our radio station, lvwithval.com. You can listen to music 24/7. We have a bunch of different radio shows and a bunch of more things coming in the new year. We just hit 10,000 subscribers on our LV with Val channel. I definitely want to see VK Career Conversation hit 10,000 subscribers. So thank you again to our viewers and our listeners. And you guys have a great holiday. I think we'll see you guys one more time before the holiday, but just in case we don't, have a great, great, great holiday and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.